Simmer down now. Can y'all hear me? Can you actually hear me? Good? A little louder? In The Storytelling Animal, Jonathan Gottschall points out that we all live in narrative, like fish live in water, making and consuming stories incessantly. We spend our days listening to news stories and songs, exchanging stories with family and friends and colleagues, watching televised fiction, and reading to ourselves and our children. We're curious about each other, and stories slake our thirst. Stories entertain us, inform us, calm us, and change us. We use them to make sense of a chaotic world. And we have this amazing ability to create stories out of fragments, even piecing together stories from the random signals flashing through our brains as we sleep. Didn't speech evolve so that we could tell each other stories? Didn't the arts evolve for the same reasons, starting with those ancient cave paintings? And writing may have developed as a way to track commerce, but it proved well suited to stories as well, and a novel form of storytelling called the novel emerged. And so novelist became a profession or pursuit, and conventions got established, and then novelist began to play with narrative, working against those conventions, and realized that a long exchange of letters between fictional characters could tell a novel-sized story. And so a new set of conventions arose, the epistolary novel. And so we have epistolary novels by Aphra Behn, Mary Shelley, and many others. In 1897, Bram Stoker pushed the epistolary novel a little further, stitching together a collection of fictional newspaper clippings, journal entries, telegrams, ship's logs, and letters to make a big patchwork story, and writers kept playing, understanding that their human readers, those animals that live and breathe narrative, have a sophisticated ability to glean stories from non-narrative forms. If we can piece together stories from letters and diaries and such, maybe we can piece together stories from just about any text, given the right clues and the right sequence. I've been an enthusiastic consumer of books like Pale Fire, an elaborately disguised novel. The centerpiece is a long poem by a fictional poet, preceded by a 20-page foreword and followed by a 100-page commentary by a jealous colleague. And in 1985, Ursula Le Guin released Always Coming Home, a novel disguised as academic folklore, chronicling a community of people, the Kesh, living in the distant future. Chapters on their rituals, diet, and customs are accompanied by maps and drawings. David Levithan defines a relationship between two nameless New Yorkers by defining terms such as ardent, beguile, and deadlock. Each definition is a brief first-person vignette, most less than a page long. Despite these limitations, he depicts a constellation of intimate moments as the lovers cope with various difficulties. How to Get Filthy Rich in Rising Asia poses as a self-help manual with chapter titles such as 1, Move to the City, and 2, Get an Education. Hamid describes the life of the son of an unnamed Asian country who rises from poverty to become a bottled water tycoon. Important artifacts and personal property from the collection of Lenore Doolin and Harold Morris, including books, street fashion, and jewelry, by Leanne Sharpton, is a novel in the form of an auction catalog. Photos and captions tell the story of the relationship between a young food columnist and a middle-aged photographer living in New York City. So, in 2009, I took a break from trying to convince the gatekeepers to publish my memoir, and I returned to working on the novel I had abandoned 3 years earlier. It was the story of an immigrant who was baffled by U.S. culture, in part because simplistic ESL textbooks have influenced his perceptions. One of my goals in revision was to incorporate much more of the rhetoric of textbooks like this one. I spent the summer transforming a conventional novel into a novel disguised as an ESL textbook, which told the story of an immigrant to the U.S. who was baffled by our culture. And so, Americanization, Lessons in American Culture and Language, was born. One thing novels and language textbooks have in common is dialogue, which came in handy, and I learned to pack narrative clues into grammar activities. Some readers have been a little confused, and it seems to be strangely popular overseas. Revising Americanization was fun, and I've been told it's fun to read. A playful approach energized the writing for me, allowing me to obey Elmore Leonard's famous exhortation to leave out the parts that readers tend to skip. Long passages developing plot and character were cut in favor of vocab lists and quiz questions. And then, on April 20th, 2010, British Petroleum's Deepwater Horizon oil rig, working in 5,000 feet of water, 130 miles southeast of New Orleans, exploded, as you know, killing 11 men and spewing 200 million gallons of oil into the Gulf over the next 5 months. Suddenly, it seemed obvious that we had gone too far in our desperate search for the raw material that powers and lubricates our planes, trains, and automobiles, that paves our roads and roofs, that we mold into cell phones and toys and packages and clothes and ink and preservatives and, yes, chewing gum. Did anyone ever tell us what we were signing up for? Did petroleum companies explain the terms of use and ask if we agreed to them before continuing? Did we click agree? And were we ever notified of updates to those terms of use? I don't think so. But I do think that even a terms of use agreement can tell a story. It can even tell the story of how a disaster very much like the Deepwater Horizon fiasco could have been caused by aliens upset over our profligate use of petroleum. And so I wrote Oily, a novel disguised as a terms of use agreement. So in The Storytelling Animal, Gottschall not only pointed out that stories captivate and amuse us, but also that they can affect change. I'm not much of a street activist yet, but I like to write, and Oily is my way of saying enough is enough. It is my 200-page middle finger to British Petroleum. End of story.